Welcome everyone to this Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program Better Than Ever. Now, in the previous episode we completed this contract, Orbit Kerbin, and we now have a full set of contracts from the Kerbin World First Record Keeping Society. Now, we did earn a lot of funds, science and reputation from that previous contract, but I don't think we're going to be doing so well in this episode. So what should we try? Well, I suggest we clear out a few of these very basic contracts just to do some of the tedious work of gaining science for Kerbin. So let's try this test LVT-45 liquid engine whilst landed at Kerbin. Its prestige is trivial, so we're not getting much of an advance or a completion reward. But 5 science is better than anything that we could get by doing some of the other contracts. Plus we'll get 4 reputation. So we will accept that one. What else should we try? Well, let's try testing the Sepratron whilst landed at Kerbin again. It's a trivial contract. It will provide us with 144 funds in total, assuming we don't use up too much of it building the craft. But we do get 5 science, and that's a pretty hefty sum. And 4 reputation. Now, we can only have 2 contracts. Gene can't manage more than 2 with his rather paltry equipment that he has, so let's accept that contract and head on over to the VAB and see what ship we should build. Back in our now familiar VAB, let us select the command pod, start our vehicle, nothing unusual about that. Now let's get our contracts up. Now we need to test the LVT-45 liquid fuel engine whilst landed at Kerbin, and you can see from the note we must activate the part through staging, and the same is true for our Sepratron. So basically the same test at the same point landed on Kerbin. So let us go to the engine section and pick our engine. Now notice I'm not adding any fuel because technically we don't actually need any, and we'll see that in a minute. Let's pick our Sepratron. We only need the one to test, so let's save a smidgen of funds, 50 funds, by not having 2, and the reason it's not going to fall over is because I'm going to right click it and take out all the solid fuel. So we have 2 engines with no fuel, 1 capsule and 1 Jebediah, making 1,595. Now we will recover most of this. In fact, hopefully we'll recover all of it. So we should be making a sizable profit. So let's get on out to the launch pad and find out. Jeb is in position in his rather unusual looking craft, so the proof is going to be in the pudding. Now we can see we are definitely on Kerbin and we are definitely landed. So will these tests go green without any fuel at all? Vote now. 3, 2, 1, test. Brilliant! No fuel required at all. We have successfully completed those 2 rather trivial contracts. So let's recover this vehicle, save all that lovely fund, and go and get something more trivial. See you in a minute. Now we're back with Gene in mission control, having a look at the newly available contracts. We have test the small solid fuel booster whilst landed at Kerbin for 45 advance, 45 completion, no science, but we will get 4 reputation, so we will accept that one. Now we have 2 further landed at Kerbin contracts. We have the stack decoupler landed at Kerbin and the launch stability enhancer while landed at Kerbin. Now that gives us 12 science. So I think we should pick that one because science is our thing. So we can only have 2, so we will have to leave that one for another day. So let's pick this one and head on over to the VAB to build another trivial craft. Back in the VAB we find ourselves looking at our previous craft, so let's get rid of the pieces we don't need. Let us get our contract up and check what parts we do need. We need the RT10 solid fuel booster, so let's put that on the bottom, and using our fuel trick, let's take all the fuel out. Let's go over to structural, and we see we have this part here. This highlighted in blue part is a prototype part. We don't own it, but we can attach it to our vehicle. Now it is going to drop our vehicle to the ground, so we are going to have to actually attach it. So let's make sure it's attached, and then lower our vehicle as low as it will go, because when we launch this vehicle it will let go. Now we can only we can only test these things whilst landed at Kerbin. We can only test this whilst landed at Kerbin. There's no fuel to remove from it, so I think we should go out and test it. I'll see you on the launch pad. Back out on the launch pad as we are. Only minutes seem to have passed, and there's only a couple of things that I am beginning to get concerned about. One, the cracks developing in the launch pad. Jeb doesn't seem to be that bothered. But the other is the height of the vehicle. Now, the launch stabilizer has adjusted itself, clever prototype that it is, to a minimum height above the ground. But cross fingers. Let's see if we can test our solid fuel booster and our launch stability enhancer whilst landed at Kerbin. 3, 2, 1, test. And there we go. It survived. Certainly hit the ground a little bit less than the usual 10 meters per second. So, right, I think we need a bit of proof that we have actually been testing these vehicles. So Gene should be happy. So let's recover this vehicle and head on back and see him. Right, back in mission control. Gene has highlighted we have one more landed at Kerbin contract, which is to test a stack decoupler whilst landed at Kerbin. So that'll give us 45 funds as an advance and 113 on completion, with 1 science and 4 reputation. Not much, that's why it's trivial, but we will take it. Now in the meantime, Sean's Cannery has decided that it needs to get into the space game. Now in this case, we have to recover or transmit scientific data from space around Kerbin. So we basically just need to get into space. Now we know how to do that. They will give us an advance of 4,635 funds, but look at that! 29,200 funds for success, 1 science, and a hefty amount of reputation. So I'm liking this contract. So let's pick that one and head on over to the VAB for a 3rd launch in this episode. Right, busy day here at KSC. 3rd launch in a day. Let's just double check our contracts. We need to transmit or recover scientific data from space around Kerbin, and we need to test the TR-18A stack decoupler while landed at Kerbin. Those seem to be 2 contradictory contracts, so let's see how we're going to solve them. First, a command pod. Start off with the bog standard command pod, the intermediate fuel tank, and our hyper efficient LV909 engine. Good start. Now from the utility category, let's get the nose parachute, but we know that's not enough to slow us down, as we saw in the previous episode. So let's try 2 of these radial mount parachutes mounted on the fuel tank. So 2 of those, 1 on either side. And then from the science category, let's pick up some goo containment units, 2 of those for balance. All the science we can get, the better. Now we've not actually tried transmitting any data, so let's try a transmitter, not 3. I don't know how that happened. Let's try 1, not 3. 1 transmitter, and of course we need our Kerbal engineering system just so we know how we're getting on. So that's going to be our top stage. Now, The actual launch stage itself, let's get a separator first. Let's get a separator in here. Now that's not going to be any good for our main test because we need to test whether we're on the ground, not when we're halfway into space, so that's no good. So let's go and get another fuel tank, not another engine. Let's get another fuel tank. Get an engine. Now if we use the LVT-30, there we go, gives us 3,600 delta V. Not enough to get us into orbit, but enough. Let us get ourselves a stack decoupler, because this is the stack decoupler that we are going to test on the ground. So let's just rearrange our staging so that we are now appropriately staged. We can save a little bit of fuel and a little bit of money by removing the monopropellant. So we now have 3,637 delta V. That should just about get us into space, I would thought. We have our decoupler here that we are going to test landed on Kerbin, our main ascent engine, and then up here at the top our space insertion engine, and of course our parachutes to help on the way down. So let's head on out to the launch pad and get this thing tested. Right, for the third launch of the day, the wind has picked up. You'll notice there's a slight sway in our rocket. So let's get the SAS on. Let's get the thrust ready at maximum. Let's have our contract window open, and notice we are indeed landed at Kerbin. So let's launch. 3, 2, 1, launch. And there's our first test complete. Good start to the mission, I guess. Now next thing we need to check is our vertical speed, because this is quite a light vehicle. So let's just reduce the throttle just a little bit. We don't want to get our vertical speed too much ahead of the terminal velocity, or we will be inefficient, as we know. But otherwise, Jeb seems happy with how the mission is going, which is a good thing. If he's happy, Gene's happy, and we are all very happy. So 3.7, 3.8, there we go, 4 kilometers. This is what we need to check out. We need to check out the apoapsis height, which we need to get to about 70 to make sure we're in space when we take our measurements. Now we have 2 U containers, so let's just check whether there's any science to be gained at this altitude. 6.3 science. Now we're not in space, so let's just keep that data. We won't transmit it, we will capture it on the way back down when we recover the vessel. Let's start leaning over just a little bit to follow our usual trajectory, now at 11 kilometers. Get over to the 45-degree mark. Almost out of this stage fuel. And there we go. Now, we are a little low in the low altitude to be using this LV909 engine, so let's get maximum throttle. So this certainly wouldn't be useful for any real orbital maneuvers, but it will do us just fine for this contract. There we can see Minmus in the distance, something I think we need to visit one of these days. So as part of our observations, let's just pick off that as a nice postcard for Gene and carry on up. So we're at 45 kilometers now, 47. Well, that's our periapsis. Apoapsis height. If that's our periapsis, we're in trouble. Actual height is 37, hence the stars are now visible. Apoapsis is 63, coming up 67, and there we go, 71. That will get us into space, where we need to recover some science or to transmit some science. We're going to try transmitting some science from space. So we're at 50 kilometers, so we've got 1 minute and 16 seconds to go before we arrive at our apoapsis. Now what science do we think we are going to do? We've got one more goo container and we have a crew report that we can take. So let's wait for Apoapsis to arrive in 58 seconds and we will take both of those and transmit one of them in order to complete our contract. Now there is an important fact about transmitting data which we will see very shortly. So we're now at 66, 67, very close now, just 2 kilometers to go, 68, 69, and we are now in space, hence the music. Now let's quickly observe the mystery goo. Now notice if we transmit that data we get nothing back. Transmitting does lose some quality of data. So let's just keep that. Let's get a crew report. But crew reports can be transmitted for 100% of their value. So let's transmit that and complete our contract. Brilliant. Easy enough done. But that is one important factor. Some science will be lost transmitting back to Kerbin. Crew reports are one that don't. Obviously, the poor quality of the reports is already guaranteed. It doesn't need transmission to make them any better. Or worse, in this case. So let's just get another postcard for Jean as we plummet back down into the atmosphere. So let's just get ourselves orientated towards retrograde as we come in and see whether these 2 parachutes on the side and the 3rd parachute at the top have the desired effect. Now we're not really going to slow down until we get to 30,000 meters, so let's just use the miracle of time warp to get us down into the atmosphere. Now in physical time warp you can still maneuver. It's a little bit jerky, as you can imagine, but you can still maneuver. So there we go, starting to come down into the twilight. Reduce the time warp. Let's take the T key off, just let gravity and aerodynamics do their thing. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But let's now trigger the parachutes. And they will bring us down safely into the ocean. Put the T key on, just stop the rolling as the sun sets over Kerbal Space Center. Rather foggy horizon, it would appear. But we still get a fair glow across that horizon. So 3.5 kilometers, a nice peaceful drop. Let's release the T key. Let gravity bring us down vertically. Coming down into water, 99 meters per second there. We still have 1.6 kilometers to go before hitting the surface, but I think this is going to be a little softer landing than we had in the Highlands in the previous episode. Hey Jeb, we might actually get to recover the whole vehicle. There we go, 5 meters per second. Much better. So while we're dropping down, let's just review our 2 contracts. This was the one from Sean's Cannery, science data from space around Kerbin. We've completed that, and another 29,000 funds added. We also tested the stack decoupler, which is still on the launch pad. We can cover that later, for a rather trivial amount of funds, science and reputation. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.